team here that worked on, not the whole team, but a portion of the team that worked on this project. I had the opportunity to speak by myself, but these guys really made this thing happen, so I want to give them each an opportunity to talk about their part and how they made this whole thing come together. So we have Dave Selden, he's here in the white shirt, art director at Parr. We have Ryan Parr next to him as a CSS, XHTML expert, and then Kelly White, our software engineer, on the end there. So there's a Freightliner and my CSS Vanguard, right? Okay. So a little bit of backstory on this project. Just a little bit about Parr itself. Parr, we've been in web development for about 8 years. I myself started about 2 years ago. Parr's been through that bubble burst that happened and kind of made it through some of the downturn in the web industry. And a big part of that was they have a good base of manufacturing clients, I think. And that's one thing that really gets us excited about working at Parr. Freightliner Group is one of our clients. We do a lot of different projects for different members of their group. There's Freightliner Trucks, Sterling, or Select Trucks, which is one of their used truck divisions, and that's what we'll talk about tonight. Freightliner Corporate and some other divisions that they have. We also do a lot of other manufacturing clients like LP, building supplies. We do Carrier and Bryant air conditioning and HVAC. We don't do a lot of Intel or Nike, which is unusual for a web agency in this town. But we do have this commonality with a lot of our clients, is this manufacturing base, and they have a unique set of needs and in terms of the web and marketing, online marketing. And it's something that really draws a lot of a certain type of designer to pop art because of that focus. You know, whether it's trucks or Leatherman tools or air conditioners, it's cool parts, that move in some kind of interesting way. So it's a unique part of pop art. Also, we're about 18 people, very passionate about the web and where it's going. But we also try to ground that in the business needs of the clients that we're working with. So, I mean, there's always that tension, right? You need to meet the business needs of your clients, but also progress while you're doing that. And so web standards was something that came around, we've all been familiar with it for years now. And the challenge that when I came to Parr was I wanted to really shift away from that table-based design. Is everyone familiar with the difference between table-based design and CSS design? Okay, so I won't go into that too much. So we really wanted to go into that area, and the problem was, a few years ago, the examples that were out there in terms of what was possible with table-based or with CSS design didn't look that interesting. They were very minimal. It was hard to see what the value was when you could do something so much more engaging and exciting with traditional table-based. Everyone was set up to make designs that way. So how do you transition over? And it wasn't really that exciting. Why would we want to transition over to there? You kind of remember some of those early designs were just boxes for navs and like a big box for the content. And the stuff looked kind of plain. And so to try to sell a client on that was like, you just couldn't, right? And I think a big part of what triggered the conversion was taking a look at Zen Garden itself. And is everyone familiar with this site, CSS Zen Garden? So with this site, they created one basically XHTML page, and they invite designers to submit style sheets that reference external images. But basically, they can take this one page and transform it into a lot of different designs. And when you're looking at, and this is from Dave Shea, and when you're looking at what you can do with this same web page and how these different designs can transform this single web page, what was amazing about Zen Garden is it all of a sudden showed designs that were not possible or very difficult with table-based design. So all of a sudden it flipped. What was now possible with CSS was much more exciting than what you could do traditionally with tables. And so now it was like, well, how do we as a web development agency transition over from a table-based production model to a CSS production model? And the triggering event was after looking at this and just like, we got to do this, we got to do this. And I know it sounds like a big plug, but we went to Web Visions last year. And I don't know if you guys went to Web Visions last year, but it was all about CSS and web standards and how this is going to allow you to create websites that can go everywhere. That was, I think the theme was of something about like just HTML everywhere. And it was all about mobile devices, print, the web in terms of computers. And Dave and I came back from that event, and we just said, we just got to do this. And so we just started working on our skills. We got Ryan into the company. He was from the outside, really knew a lot about CSS. He'd been doing it for a while. And so that's one part of the puzzle. The third part of the puzzle, Parr, Zen Garden, the third part is Select Trucks itself. Select Trucks is a used truck division of the Freightliner group. So Freightliner group encompasses like Freightliner trucks, Sterling trucks, Western Star trucks, and Freightliner group or Freightliner buys these used trucks back and they sell it through, or some of those used trucks back and sell it through Select Trucks, which is their division to sell these used trucks. Select Trucks, they both cater to fleet owners, so are businesses that are interested in fleets. So you think about a business that needs to have a lot of delivery vehicles are out there. They want to buy a lot of trucks at once. They also cater to owner-operators, which are truck drivers that's their business. They're in business for themselves. They buy their own truck, and so they have those two audiences. And they have about 50 to 60 dealer sites throughout the U.S. And so 56 dealer sites throughout the U.S. Freightliner Group itself is part of the Daimler Chrysler Group, and Freightliner does sell a majority of the trucks that are sold on the road today. So it's a brand that's well known. So those are all the pieces: Parr, Zen Garden, Select Trucks. So now just to talk about the challenge. The challenge was Select Trucks came to us with this. This is truck paper. If you ever bought a used car, you probably used Auto Trader, either online or picked up that little booklet at the gas station. But it's a way to upload your car information and photo, and then have people call you about your used car. Truck paper is the same type of thing, but for used trucks, for truck drivers or businesses interested in fleets. And so this is almost a requirement in the business. If you're selling used trucks, this is basically, you need to sell through truck paper. This is where everyone goes to look at used trucks that are available. And the challenge was, because it's a national inventory, because everyone's inventory is available there, that as a customer, your loyalty is to truck paper, not to an individual dealer site. So you're shopping for price, for just the right model. And because you're in the trucking industry, to travel to another city is not that big of a deal if you're going to get the right truck. So you go pick up the truck over there or over there. So you're not tied to a certain location. So the challenge from Select Trucks was, how can we create sites for all their dealer centers that start to establish a connection with people that are interested in that particular center and not expose this national inventory to them. They still have to use this truck paper site to advertise trucks, but how do they create their own unique presence on the web? When we looked at other sites that are similar, this is Windermere, and hopefully no one here has worked on Windermere. Anyone worked on Windermere? All right, great. No, I mean, I think this is like common, and I'm not trying to be too negative or anything like that, but this is basically when you're thinking about, let's create one site as a template and let a lot of other franchises of that business basically use that template to create their unique site, right? So you can change your name at the top. Maybe you can switch around the boxes that are here. You can write your name over and over again if you want. Different things like that. But if you go to this site for this agent, and then you go to this site for this agent, it feels like it's all part of the one big master company. Like you don't feel like you're going to, from one unique site to the next. It does feel like Windermere kind of is this umbrella over all these agents' websites. And it's really hard to do anything different. And Select Trucks didn't want us to do this, because if we created a template like this, where if you went from one center site, like in Denver, to another center site in Louisville, and they look very similar, you're basically just thinking this is one big company, Select Trucks. I just want to look at a national inventory, and that opportunity to create a unique relationship is lost. The relationship is key in terms of, so that the dealer center doesn't just offer trucks. When you're looking at truck paper, and you're selling trucks on that, it's all about price. But really there's so much more to that. There's the service, the repair, the warranty, all this thing that doesn't get listed there. And so they want to make sure that the relationship is something that's prominent, in the sense that if you're looking to buy a truck, that dealer can develop a relationship with you and learn about your business, what your needs are, sell you the next truck, the truck after that. And so the websites each had to be unique in such a way that the branding was more about that dealer center and not so much about select trucks. So looking at that model before, we saw all the Windermere sites. The challenge for us was, how do we create a bunch of dealer sites that have completely unique looks, one from another, so that when you go there, you don't feel like you're just part of this big national group of dealer centers. That you feel like when you go to the Louisville center site, it feels just like Louisville. And you go to another one, you might not even know it's another Select Trucks division. It just feels like that's that business's website. Another challenge was 90% of the content on these sites is the same. So if you're going from, if you're looking up, let's say, about different Freightliner models on the Louisville site, you're going to read a little about the Coronado truck or about the Century class truck. And Select Trucks wants, the corporate wants to be able to basically manage that. They don't want this site to say something different or not true about this model, and this site to say something else that's not, that's a little off, or to see that degrade over time. You've all developed sites where the day you launch is the best day of the site, and then over time it just starts to degrade. So how do we give Select Trucks corporate the ability to control a majority of the content on these sites and still create this kind of unique look? And the last challenge was, how do we do 30 sites in 30 weeks? We've never done anything like this before at Parr. You think about your traditional web development process where you have a kickoff, you have an interview, you come back with mood boards and wireframe. Over time, it just feels like in any kind of industry where you're trying to make sure that you're in step with the client, that what you're delivering to them is predictable, your process starts to expand to allow for, basically to take out the risk, right? So if we were to deliver 30 sites, which they needed in 30 weeks, how do we do that? Because we can't do that with our traditional process. So other than solving all these other business needs and trying to incorporate CSS to pull this project off, how do we completely change our process at Parr so that we can do this amount of work in this short a time? And if you think about it, 30 sites in 30 weeks, it's not just stacking them so that you have one designer working on one site for 8 of those weeks, another one doing it 8 of those weeks. The designers had to trade back and forth every other week. So you only have 25 hours as a designer to come up with the complete design for the site and then pass it off into production. And that includes all the interview and all that stuff, and Dave will get into those details. But so it presented its own unique challenge there, how to get the client to how to get the right design for each of these clients. I'm going to hand it over now to Kelly, and he's going to talk about the programming challenges. After him, Dave's going to talk about the design challenges and the solutions, and then Ryan will talk about the CSS. We'll follow up at the end, and we'll show you all the different designs that came out of this project. So without any further ado, this is Kelly.
Okay, my name is Kelly White. I am a software engineer at Parr. My role for this project was the technical lead, but also the business analyst. Collecting the requirements, interviewing Freightliner corporate, Freightliner corporate, finding out what they needed, what they wanted to do, and making sure that we did that correctly. Something about requirements in there, I think. So, because of the schedule here, we knew that we need to pump out so many sites. They need to be a very aggressive schedule. My time on here needed to start out at where I would be putting in a lot of time, but it needed to quickly approach 0 for the first, after the second site. We could only do this by having a framework there. My needs was for a framework that would be extensible, that would be simple for the customer to use, that would be stable, that would be, I said extendable, didn't I say extendable? It would be clean, it would put out correct XHTML, and it would not put out table-driven layout. Wondering how we would do this, we looked at a couple different platforms. One was .NET New. Many of you are probably familiar with PHP New, different content management systems out there. This is one that we looked at because it is scalable, it is open source, under a BSD type license. There is a table layout in there, and there's a question of whether or not we could remove that, whether or not we could extend it. As we looked around on the message boards and talked to different people of the .NET Nuke core team, they said, no, it is too young of a framework and we cannot do that yet. We decided to take this platform and run with it with an existing client for a smaller site. The proof of concept did work, and so we decided it met that checklist. It is end tier. The nice thing about .NET Nuke 4.0, that is what we used, and it was very important because it took advantage of ASP.NET 2.0 technologies. Nice thing about .NET Nuke being open source is that there's a huge number of users out there, and it is a growing user base every day. So the first problem was the framework. What would we have as a framework that we could build upon? We selected .NET Nuke. Second problem, and I'm going to group these, there's two more. The second one being corporate needs, the third one being client needs. Corporate needs, Justin mentioned their need for syndicated content, how they could be able to control pages such as what would be on a warranty page. They could update it in one spot and it would propagate out to all the different pages automatically without human interaction there. We decided to do this through, well, and also customizing that content to a point. Being able to customize the content so that a city's name could appear there. Select trucks of Memphis, select trucks of Louisville. And it could be personable. What you're seeing here is the syndicated content module that was developed where the center site, the corporate site goes in. They enter in the information they would want for a specific page. This is generic XHTML. They need to trust that their XHTML will be taken care of, the design will be taken care of by the style sheet. They enter it in here once and we display it to the different pages styled appropriately. We do this through a subscription model using web services, not RSS syndication. That met the best model. That was the core of the corporate's needs there, being able to provide that syndicated content. The client's needs was all about their inventory, being able to showcase their inventory, showcase specific trucks throughout their site. This is their truck paper site. And if you go in there and you try to enter in a new truck, you have pages and pages of nothing more than form fields on it, as tall as this screen here. It's amazing. They have a way that you can import that from a spreadsheet, but there's no way that they would want to enter this into the truck paper system and then re-enter it into our system. There's no way that they would want to upload their images into that system and then upload their images into our system. So there's a problem in how they maintain their inventory. The nice thing about the truck paper site is that they do have an export where they can export into a zip file, a data file that contains all the information about the trucks, all the images for each of the trucks, and a mapping that says which images go with which trucks. We're able to take that zip file and import it into our system, mapping up the images, and in addition to that, we also created an image management tool that would automatically create thumbnails, crop images, resize them, draw them on the fly so that this center manager didn't have to worry about it. For a user experience, it was very important that this was something that was placed at the forefront. The problem with center sites is keeping their inventory in sync. What is in truck paper is also on my Select Trucks website. How could they do that? Well, they could edit, add, delete individual trucks, but it made sense to just do a mass import and replace each time. We also made it easy for them to go ahead and flag certain trucks as featured trucks, so that these trucks could be highlighted throughout the system. And if they didn't take the time to highlight a certain truck as a featured truck, we would go ahead and select through the trucks that do have images associated with them and randomly pick one of those to highlight throughout the site. So the system wasn't broken, it worked for them. One thing I do want to talk about, now that we've talked about those needs, is in building this and designing it. Had a lot of discussions, Ryan and myself, about with the truck, there's different types of views, whether it's a featured truck view, whether it is a list view, a detail view that shows all of the data about that truck. And for across 30 different sites, to really get my time to go to 0 after the first or the second site, we need to make sure that this was done correctly, that the data was presented, the right data, and it was presented in the right order, so that we could reuse this over and over and over again without having to go back and change the framework for the next site. It meant we did have a lot of time up front, and it's an exponential equation, but eventually the limit comes out to 0, and it happened after the second site. The success of whether or not I actually met that with this team was that we were able to have a featured truck module that could be customized only by the CSS. And it was a very nice thing. I've talked enough. Let's talk about design.
Hello, I'm Dave again. When we first started talking about this project, I was not immediately interested in it. It sounded like a lot of production work and not a lot of fun. And thankfully, with Ryan's skill set, we were able to take what could have been a really terribly boring project and turn it into something that was actually pretty fun. And I think pretty successful. Once we got over that hurdle of, okay, so it doesn't have to look exactly the same and be the same structure every time. The next question was time. Given the client's budget, the designer ended up with 25 hours to produce one site. And for me, and my usual process of, there's all the kickoff meetings, and then we move into wireframes, and then we do a creative brief, and then we do mood boards, and I'm like, okay, there's no way we're going to be able to do any of that kind of stuff. So we had to really adapt our process, as Justin said, to be able to do this super quick. And the way we did that was we started out with the dealer interview. And just to talk a little bit about our customer, the people that we were delivering these sites to are center managers at used truck dealerships throughout the country. So they're in Louisville, Memphis, all over the place. Their first business skill is selling trucks. Most of them have no marketing experience at all. And I think when you work with big clients, you get used to dealing with marketing teams, in-house marketing people, have some background. It's pretty easy to communicate with them. We had to adopt a lot of our processes to elicit good design feedback and information from people who are not used to communicating that kind of stuff. And it was a real problem at first. The way we ended up addressing that was through dealer interviews. And what we did was we talked to them firstly about their business and didn't concentrate too much on the touchy-feely aspects of design. We also developed something I thought was pretty fun called a word versus word exercise. And we would say, if you were imagining your site in your head, would it be bold or would it be traditional? Would it be striking or would it be laid back? Would it be, all of these kinds of word pairs? And it began to start that conversation. We asked a lot of them for sites that they visited regularly that they thought were interesting. Most of them don't spend a lot of time on the computer, so that was kind of a dead end. But as we got going through it and got to know their business a little bit better, the project got easier. The first thing we did as a design team was to work on this homepage. Based on conversations with them, it ended up being a lot of the sites took on sort of a geographic specific design feel. In this case, we're looking at Memphis site, and we drew inspiration from the Memphis music scene and the history of rock and roll and Hatch show print. We'll talk about that a little bit in a bit. And this client was super cool. He pushed all the buttons right off the bat. He said, do whatever you want. You guys are the experts. I love Johnny Cash and Elvis and Sun Records, so go. And we had a lot of clients like that. They were pretty cool. Once you, took time to listen to them and knew that, the important thing was that you got a truck on there and it was a certain size. And, the other thing that was really scary at the first part was committing to creative excellence for 30 different sites. If you've ever worked with a client for more than a year or two, the ideas start to run a little thin when you're working with the same kinds of products time after time and trying to do new things with them. Again, as we got to know the client culture a little bit better, that became easier. But also, as designers, I think we have our bag of tricks, and it's only this big. by about site 5, that bag was empty. And we had to come up with a lot of new tricks, but I think it made us all better designers for having done that. And I think, honestly, the work got better. This is the first site we've done. And you'll see some more in a little bit. So remember that 25-hour number I told you about before? Killed about 12 hours on the home page and that initial dealer interview. So a big part of the design process was then selling half of your work to the customer on the first pass and trying to get out of the first round of design without doing a lot of revisions or starting over. And that happened from time to time, but we developed some, I think, good selling skills in talking to these customers. And another thing, this sounds so simple, but your designs, I think, have a way of getting away from you at some point. That's shown to administrative assistant or a spouse or something like that. And taken as one thing without the business rationale behind it, it can be picked apart for a lot of reasons that aren't really relevant. So one thing that we made sure to do with each of these things was to actually we created a PDF and put the document's rationale before the comp, so it couldn't be separated from the comp. So it had to be delivered one with the other. Just a little thing that ended up working pretty well. So hopefully the design got approved, and we ended up moving on to a sub-page. And that sub-page, it's pretty much a template, you know, showing the production folks and also the client how the rest of the site was going to break down stylistically. So we spent probably another 6 hours at this stage of the process doing some tweaks and making sure things are getting closer to web readiness. The next stage we did was, I think, again, working for big customers, we end up comping out every single page as it has to be reviewed by a marketing person or a legal team and things like that. And it ends up being kind of an inefficient process, but sometimes it's just a necessary evil. With this process, we were able to create what we called a master page, which just had design elements for every page on the site, but not in a really polished form. Just something to give to the production team to help them assemble and make some decisions. And also, we have a really talented production team. Scott sitting back there and Ryan are both designers as well. So we were able to give some of that work that's more efficiently done in the production process to them. And so trusting them really made this work. I think that's 90% of the success of this, actually. So that's just a quick overview of the design process we went through. And then again, I'll come back a little bit later with Justin and we'll talk through some more of the design.
My name is Ryan. I'm a CSS designer for Parr. And what I'm going to talk about is a few of the challenges we came across as we developed these sites with CSS. And the first challenge right off the bat was developing the framework for these sites, getting the XHTML correct. So we knew up front that these sites, 90% of their content is going to be the same on all these sites. So we have no access to the XHTML, we can't change it. We're totally relying on style sheets to make the site look different, differentiate each site from one another, and not have this repetitive design, which Justin mentioned earlier here. So going through that process with Kelly, we really sat down and thought about what kind of hooks do we need, what kind of IDs and classes, class selectors and stuff do we need to kind of safeguard our CSS and really be able to develop dramatically different looking sites. And we were fairly successful with that. Without code bloat or code soup, you know, we still kept the semantics of the site. So. Another issue that I ran across was browser support, and I suppose everybody here knows CSS. What's the main #1 browser that we have problems with? It's this guy down the end here. Safari, Firefox, and IE 5.5 and 6, and upcoming 7 is what we support for these sites. No problems with standard-based sites. We can use CSS2 selectors and really be creative with our style sheets. On the other hand, we have IE. We figure out a way to just target IE for these problems, these small bugs. Its major bug is a box model. It builds the box model wrong. So doing that, we decided, well, traditionally you would do conditional comment and target IE that way. With the framework that we're using with DNN, we're able to use browser sniffing. So only IE sees these targeted style sheets. And that, once again, keeps our code pretty semantic and clean and nice, so, and valid, which is another thing we're concerned about. Another challenge was we really wanted to keep the integrity of these images. Traditionally, with table-based layouts, you're slicing and dicing, and you're meshing your logos with your background, repeated background images, and really cutting up the document, and basically forcing the user to view it on one screen this way. With CSS, this allows us to keep those images separate. And one of the examples here for this site, which I'll show you a build out here next, is the logo. This is we try to utilize a lot of alpha ping transparencies. And once again, we had to target IE 6 and below with a proprietary filter to get around that issue. IE 7's coming soon, hopefully. Make our lives a whole lot easier. So with this layout, we're keeping that integrity of the logo. We're keeping the whole thing. We're not chopping it up. We're laying it with layers. And how do we do that? We're using CSS selectors such as Z-index quite a bit in these sites, and really creating layers instead of cells, which you do traditionally. So it's kind of like using Photoshop with fireworks when you're building the site or designing the site, moving elements around. We're doing the same thing with the style sheet by positioning. And here you'll see kind of how the layers are working with this site in particular. Multiple layers. We're actually, and this happens quite a bit with our featured truck module. Once again, we can't touch this XHTML, and the designers are throwing all these things at me, and the production team overlaying stuff on top of dynamic images and all this input that's coming in. And how do we do that? Well, this would have been impossible with traditional design ethics and coding. So CSS allows us to really layer those elements and create a really unique look for the site. We ran in a few more things. So traditionally we have these basic headline. Well, traditionally you have standard web fonts. We have a few to choose from, and we really didn't want to be limited to these type of fonts. Most of these center sites, we had to build the logos for them. Typography is really unique in design. We wanted to keep that flow within the design. We wanted all of our headlines to have a certain unique type font face for each center site. And our solution for that was Sean Inman's Cipher. So we're running Cipher on all these sites. You guys familiar with Cipher at all? Well, Cipher is a inline Flash replacement, which is done through CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. Once again, it keeps that semantic raw code, that XHTML, separating that presentation and content. And it also allows the center sites, if they ever had a change, to go in and change whatever they want, and that font would follow. The other alternative is to cut up probably hundreds of headline images to match these typefaces, and if there was any change across 30 sites. So you can see the big problem there.
How do you spell that, please?
Pardon me?
Cipher, how do you spell it?
S-I-F-R?
Oh, okay.
SI?
It's a
It's an
acronym.
acronym?
S-I? Yeah.
Do you know this?
Stands for Sean Inman Flash Replacement.
There you go.
Thank you.
And one of the speakers at Web Visions, I believe Mike Davidson,
Yes.
he's kind of the guy who's pushed a lot of Cipher around. ESPN's used it, ABC News, Chevrolet.com, stuff like that. So this is what we came up with. This is all of our headlines. They're Cipher enabled. So once again, this is very valuable in cutting down the time it takes us to build these sites. I mean, we did run into a few things that changed after a few sites, and we didn't have to worry about any of this. Another challenge that we're currently working on right now is the mobile audience. Now, these center sites are focused on owner-operators and fleets, and so we have truckers out there. A lot of them have cell phones. There is no TVs or portable computers in their dashboard on these trucks. If they want to search an inventory, they can. And with CSS, that makes it very, very easy for us to take that XHTML that's already been laid into the framework and build a new style sheet, apply a little bit of branding to that style sheet, and make it real light and clean and accessible with multiple media devices or mobile devices. So this is what we're working on now, and I'm going to give it off to you guys. You guys are going to go around
Question,
and check out all the sites.
so is it 30 sites or 60 sites?
30 sites.
With the mobiles?
Yes.
Okay.
Same site, different. What we're doing right now is applying a separate style sheet. So, in essence, it's 60 sites, 2 different devices. Could be 92 because we're doing print style sheets too. Many platforms to work with.
Great. So we'll have time for questions at the end too. So if you have specific questions about the programming or what Ryan just talked about in the CSS, we'll go over that too. But Dave and I wanted to show you the designs that came out of this project. We'll just kind of alternate back and forth with each of the different dealer sites. Now we're not finished. We're in design. We're about 3/4 of the way along.
Yeah, about 80%.
Okay. The first site really got launched in February, so we're about 18 sites now.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. And Ben was supposed to be here to talk tonight because he's the other designer. There's Dave. He does one site, and Ben does the next one the next week, and then Dave does one the next week. So I'm going to play Ben tonight. So I'm Ben Fogarty at Parr. I'm a designer. So anyway, we'll go through here.
So this is Memphis. We already talked about this a little bit, and it's inspired by Hatch Show Print. If you aren't familiar with Hatch, I suggest you check it out. One of the funny things about this is, so this was the first site we did for Memphis, and actually Hatch Show Print is in Nashville, Tennessee, which is home to another center. I didn't remember that until this site was already done. And weeks later, you'll see Nashville's going to come up, and the first thing out of their mouth is, "You stole our design." So it was a bit of a challenge, but we had a lot of fun with it and great client. Louisville, Kentucky, inspired by the Derby. If you didn't know, it's the home of the Kentucky Derby. Also home of the Mid-America Trucking Show, the world's largest truck show. I just attended. I really like this site a lot. The exhaust stacks, kind of horse ears, and there's a little horse background in there, and some fun stuff. This was our first challenging customer. I had just gotten back from Boston when this site came up, and my experience, like many tourists in Boston, was a lot of museums. And so the site I originally delivered was very ornate and somewhat antiquated in look. And I sent it to him, and he called me up and straightened me out and said, "Truckers are not about antiques, they're about patriotism and football," and so on and so forth. I actually think it's one of our stronger designs, and I'm glad it turned out the way it did. But it was a good reality check, and I think again we learned a little bit more about our customers when we did this one. So Chicago was inspired a little bit by some of the great graphic design of the Blue Note of the 50s, and also just the nightlife of Chicago. The only downside to this was once you put a skyline in one of these center sites, every center site after that wants to have a skyline in theirs, and not all of them are very unique. Grand Rapids is one that's not very unique. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. He was great to work with. Denver, obviously, you got the mountains. It was kind of a subtle nod to Ansel Adams, snow and so on and so forth. Wet floor. Ice there. I think it's actually a really striking design. It's just, I think the simplicity of it is sort of hard to discuss. It's nice.
I said at the beginning we were going to alternate, but as you can see, Dave did like the first 6 or 7 sites. So Dave was doing one design a week, and so when like Massachusetts backed up, and like he was like in the swim of clients and getting all these designs approved. So he just really did an amazing job. I was his wingman. So anyway, no. But this is Ben's first site. Ben first worked with Los Angeles here. Los Angeles was a unique situation in the sense that their dealer site was not close to like the beach or traditional kind of California imagery. They were basically tucked inland and next to the freeway, and it wasn't a very like pretty scene around where they were. It's kind of a warehouse district area, and they didn't want to get the impression that they were down on the beach or anything like that. So we couldn't use that. Ben couldn't use that design element. Also, they have a very large region that spans just more than just Los Angeles, a big portion of California, and so we wanted to incorporate some kind of map into the design to show kind of their region or how expansive the dealer site covers. And the third thing was, as we're talking to them, trying to figure out like what could be unique about this. California driving really took that interstate or highway metaphor, and that's what kind of Ben worked with. And the center really liked that, and because it showed not only that it's kind of a nod to California in terms of the driving there, but also it showed that it's expansive with the map and the highway metaphor, that they really do have a large region that it covers, and so they really liked how we pulled off all those different elements with that.
Grand Rapids. They were one of the most sophisticated customers in terms of their marketing, in that they actually had a kind of a shtick, and theirs was,
What language is that?
These are our comps. Some of these are still in production, so these are, some of them have some Greek text in them, just for placement to show where text is going to go once they put the stuff in there. So Grand Rapids actually is an indoor truck showroom. So if you're ever looking for a truck in winter, I highly suggest you visit Grand Rapids because it's heated and you can walk around and kick tires. They're very nice people. But no, we had a lot of fun with this, and they were good to work with. They had some, they had sites they liked, and it was very easy to work with them.
Little Rock was Ben's next project, and they really wanted just to highlight the beautiful scenery around the area, just how green it is, and so to them it was all just about the outdoors. Don't highlight the city too much; it's all about the outdoors around that area. So Ben did a nice job, and he had just like kind of a classic, just kind of look and design elements in there that I think really were successful. They're very happy with that one.
Twin Cities. My wife Sarah is from the Twin Cities, and so this was kind of a fun one for me. Obviously, they were real into the outdoors and wanted to convey that kind of sense and the romance of the outdoors there. Do Aurora Borealis and truck by the side of the road. So it's kind of a fun one to do.
Is that the map? in the back?
It is, and
Form
this is a really good example of what would just be ridiculous to do in a table-based layout. I don't know how you could do that without it being several megs in size. It's going to be, yeah.
This is one too where Dave started and went down one direction, thought he understood what the client wanted, and they came back and, you know, this is one that took a couple of revisions, and so it was good. Las Vegas, they were all about, they kind of had an unusual market where they don't sell a lot of, you know, traditional trucks that the other sites sell. They sell a lot of construction vehicles in Las Vegas area because of all the development there. And they also only sell white trucks because of the heat there, right? So they wanted to incorporate trucks that were used in construction and also had a white color. This is actually not the final. We changed out this. There's now a dump truck there that creates the A. But anyway, Ben did a great job with this and incorporating the truck as part of the logo, and kind of interesting.
This was kind of interesting. You have associations with every place, and I apologize if any of you are from Florida, but Florida is not one of my favorite places in the country. So I had to dig deep in terms of finding some inspiration for it. But I do like cigars, and Miami has a well-known Cuban population, and that was the direction that the center manager really wanted to head. It's also the only site that has Spanish content in it, though I think more and more of them are going to be adding that. The trucking industry is really looking for drivers, so if any of you decide you don't want to be designers or CSS producers, you can go be a truck driver.
How much is the pay?
It's by the mile, so it depends on how long you drive, which is federally regulated. So there's, anyway. We know a lot about trucks now. Don't get us started.
Cleveland was a really interesting challenge for Ben because the client, I don't know if any of you are familiar with Cleveland, but they have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And to the client, Cleveland is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And it is that, if you've ever seen the Louvre, I don't know, it just looks like the Louvre, right? It's that glass pyramid. And so it was a really interesting set of design constraints. The client needed the glass pyramid to be there from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It had to be this model and this exact photo of this truck, this classic XL red truck. It had to be in the design. And you need to add this Cleveland Rocks thing that they developed themselves somewhere in the design. This one went. And I think once they saw the skyline Chicago, they wanted that too. But so it was really unique because this went back and forth. You know, Ben really tried to take those constraints and maybe play with them a little bit. And every time he showed it to the client, they're like, no, 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 it needs to be this, 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 and this. And so he finally came up with a nice montage that kind of is a pretty good design and incorporates their Cleveland Rocks, you know. So anyway, they were really happy with it. This was Ben's next one, and this was the one Dave was talking about where, hey, you stole our design, right? As soon as they saw Memphis, they're like, you know, hash prints from Nashville. So we came up with this thing, well, you know, Memphis is rock and roll, Nashville's a little country, what else in Nashville? And so we really took the Grand Ole Opry, took those design elements, and Ben did an incredible job incorporating that into the design of the site. And so, you know, just anything from the font to the illustrative effects and stuff like that, just really did an outstanding job on this site. They were very happy. They thought they were going to get something second best to Memphis, and they feel like now that they came out ahead, they're really excited about that design. Charlotte is a home of NASCAR. So in the trucking industry, you know, cars get from event to event on you know, being hauled by trucks, and so truck sponsorship of NASCAR. Truck drivers are big fans of NASCAR. So this was the site where we really had, you know, we all knew before we were going to talk to them it was going to be all about NASCAR. So Ben just really incorporated a lot of great elements in here, and we started playing around at this point where, you know, when you roll over this thing on the live side, you know. We're very nervous about incorporating too much flashing like that because once we do, we know all the next sites are going to ask for the same thing. So we kind of have to play it safe. Even though we just want to go crazy, we have to make sure that we don't go too far. So.
Because we keep pushing each other. This is one, I don't know, you know, the bag of tricks was empty, and so you got to find a new bag. And I found one with a giant trout on it, or a bass rather. No, the headquarters for Bass Pro Shops is actually in Springfield, Missouri, and is considered among fishing and wildlife enthusiasts to be a mecca. And there really are business reasons for this, I swear. The center manager, as Justin was saying about Las Vegas, he carries some kind of unusual inventory. This center manager tries to buy the odd trucks. So most centers sell this kind of truck. He sells, you know, flatbeds and the dump trucks and those kinds of vehicles. So it was a good way to get it on there. And boy, I had my fingers crossed he was going to be okay with this, and he was. So. just having fun with it.
Select Trucks of Seattle. This dealer, the manager for this dealer site was a photographer, and so he's very interested in incorporating his photography, and Ben took it one step further and incorporated photo elements. So there's like photo corners around different elements on the site and things like that. So it's a nod to him. No one visiting would know that, but it makes him feel great about his site. And they are the ones that saw also the Chicago, and we need a skyline too. So this is the one that we couldn't get away from the skyline. Seattle has a pretty good skyline, so it worked. That's that site.
And this is just kind of a sneak peek into one we're still working on in the design. But Detroit's obviously the Motor City, and so Motor City used trucks is kind of our homage to pinstriping and kind of the Indian Larry car customizing. He's a motorcycle customizer or whatever. Culture, and they're really into it. So early on, we're still getting to a little bit more polishing, but so I would share one kind of in progress. This is kind of the level we would get them to when we first present them to them, and then spend a few more hours just in case. So.
And then when you've done too many of these, you start to invent your own center sites in your head, and you play around this way. And so sometimes you just need another design just for relief to get your mind sane about the other designs you're working on. Our trucks are out of this world. Anyway, those are all the designs so far. The ones that are live today, that if you want to check them out, are these 4 sites. All the designs that you saw are in different stages in queue in the process. Some are just waiting for the dealer to push the button and say yes. Some are waiting for a little bit of tweak in terms of content, the description they have to fill out about their city or their center. Some are still being produced by Ryan or Scott. But you can check these out, and new ones will go live pretty much like once a week. So I'd like to leave it open for questions. If you have any questions that don't get addressed today, or you want to find out more about the project, these are email addresses. You can go ahead and contact us. You can also go through Pop-Art or give us a call. Glad to talk to you about it. So that is our project. That's Freightliner and the CSS Zen Garden. I'd like to open it up now for questions. If anyone has any specific questions about the project, about CSS, or anything, feel free to ask.
So for the pictures of the trucks, was that just laid on top of another image with CSS?
You mean where we had the featured truck?
Yeah. Was that actually on top, or?
It depends on the site. Like I think, let's see, if we go to Los Angeles, it's actually on top and underneath something.
Like that one and
like
right
that,
here.
like that one.
Yes.
Is that actually on like a layer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we have
position.
dynamic inventory coming through,
Uh-huh.
just positioning with a little bit of Z.
And what amazed me, and I had to get used to this all the time, is Ryan would be working on it. I'd see the comp at Dave's desk or Ben's desk, and then Ryan would be working on it. And I'm like, that's not the browser. That's the browser? That's not the browser. Like, he knows how to translate this stuff and make it work, so it looks exactly like the comp, and like, I don't know, I still can't figure out how he does it, but he does it, and so it's possible. Any more questions?
As far as browser compatibility goes, what's the level? I mean, are they exactly the same on Firefox, and on the PC, Firefox on the Mac, Safari, all that?
Yeah, most of the standard browsers are identical to one another.
What's the level of difference?
It depends how complex the design is. Like, I'm looking at this one, it's fairly complex, so we're going to use a lot of absolute positioning and stuff like that. And most of the browsers treat absolute positioning a little bit different. They weigh them out just slightly different. Of course, IE completely blows it. So,
who uses that?
no one in this room, hopefully.
Did you try styling forms?
Pardon
Yeah,
me?
Did you style
we
your
do
forms?
have some forms on
Yes.
the site.
Well,
Yes.
a big challenge with this
Forms
project
is
is
another
actually,
issue with IE.
DNN, the .NET Nuke that we use as a platform, basically each of these pages is a form. It treats every page that it generates as a form, so every design that we did was a form, and that was the first problem we ran into. Ryan was working on this great design. He came up with his own clean XHTML that he's going to give the programmers, make this code when you generate the code. And when we generated the first code, stuff was acting all weird, and we realized, well, the page we're working with is basically one big form, and so we had to reconfigure and learn how to do style sheets on all form sites.
But like input elements, you were.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a contact us form, there's a request a truck form, and yeah, it's all the stuff you'd expect, input boxes, drop downs, radio buttons. And that's probably the single most divergent thing between browsers.
Yeah.
Everything else is probably
how'd you handle that in
99.9.
Safari? How'd you handle that in Safari?
Inline for buttons and stuff.
Yeah.
We did it inline. It's the only way to keep the images. Like if this was a button, this would type it from image source. What a nerd. But Safari's working on that. They already, what's it? Their next version. Next version, they're going to fix this so we can actually control form elements with Safari via CSS. So.
How did you handle Cipher degrading for people without JavaScript, without Flash?
People don't have JavaScript? No. We tested. We've got some very basic degradation. If you don't have JavaScript and Flash, you get some basic Arial style headlines. They don't look as good, but they're readable and they work, and that met our
But
requirements.
that didn't screw up your design in it, like
No.
in terms of things.
Depends on who you talk to.
Beyond
He did a lot of research on Cipher.
It's
and
functional and
making sure it
everything works. The
The
pages don't.
user
mess
wouldn't
with
know
it.
something was missing,
Right.
but if you saw the two, you'd be like, yeah, that was lovely.
You just try to match the typeface as close as possible. And you have two options, serif or not serif. So.
Right.
It's Comic Sans.
Comic Sans.
If you skipped wireframes and, what did you say, storyboards or
Mood boards, wireframe. Oh yeah. We developed a pretty big process over the years. You know.
What did you do? What did you do? How did you approach that?
Well, we approached it as Dave was saying, that it was key that all those steps that we developed over time to mitigate risk, which created a bigger production process, we had to get rid of all that, because you had, from time that we had the first interview, it was 2.5 weeks to the comp. You know, and you're not just working on that, you're working on a lot of other projects. And so we really had to, like Dave created that word versus word interview and tool, and that really helped a lot to extract it out. But you just kind of, what we realized is we had to be bold. A lot of times when you have a lot of steps in the process, you're not allowing yourself to be that bold, because you're saying, does this fit your mood? Is this kind of where you want the elements? And you're gauging it along the way, but it also creates a more timid design process in some ways, because you don't have that opportunity just to say, like, what do you think of this? And just really amaze them. You know, you're developing predictability along the way to the comp, right?
It's going to change how you do your future clients?
Yeah, it already has changed. It creates this sense of boldness where, yeah, we are experts. Like, we should be able to talk to a client, really extract out what they like, what they don't like, what their business is like, and be able to just really wow them with a comp, you know, and to strip a lot of that stuff out. So.
Or totally miss, which
Yeah.
really informs the next
Right.
one. I mean,
And that does happen.
You know, it helps though that you're working with some guy at a truck dealership rather than the marketing
Yes,
department.
yeah. When we work with larger clients at marketing department, they want the traditional process because they have a lot of stakeholders they got to get buy-in from, and so. But we're still trying to figure out the lessons learned from this project. How do we incorporate that in so we can be bold with even those clients and not feel like it's designed by committee too much. Any other questions?
I'm just curious how much
Yes.
staff the designers have to knock out the graphic elements for them.
You're
What
looking
do you
at
guys do?
we got one more that's missing. that Justin
Yeah, I'm
is standing
representing
for.
the other guy that's missing.
So
But that's it.
You do
Five-
all the
five
graphic
guys.
elements here for the initial comps.
I would create the comp and then hand that to Ryan, who would then take it from there. And so I'd be creating a PNG, a fireworks file, and or a PSD or whatever, and hand that to Ryan, and he would take it from there.
How much CSS do you know as a designer?
A fair amount, not nearly as much as him.
So did you have a good idea of what was possible in the library?
I like to push Ryan a little bit, and usually we can work something out. Like it's.
We usually have a small little review for every, kind of at the end of the process, and talk about it for a good 30 minutes. And, is this doable? Is this not doable? And I'd say, no, this is not doable. And Dave's like, do it anyway. So, and we'd figure out how to do it, you know.
But he sits like about this far from me, so we,
Yeah, we
and our
just-
monitors face each other, so it's like, what do you think? Do you think we can do that? And he'll say, I don't know, man.
Did you do all the XHTML before you had even created a style sheet, or did you?
Yes, we did. We did all the XHTML first. Kelly took that, put it into the framework, DNN, and from that we developed, our first site was Memphis, and then we kind of started working with the styles. That's when I was talking about that earlier, it was vital for us to make sure we had all those hooks in place before we started this project. Otherwise, we were just limiting ourselves right off the bat, you know. And plus being aware of, you know, not bloating the code with too much classes. We didn't want a class on every element in the page, you know.
That was, you know, we talked about CSS Zenguard at the beginning. That was something that they had to do in that project, was create a page that had enough hooks for all these designs to work with, and that was a big inspiration of this project. We couldn't do it without that kind of idea. Otherwise, every single site would have its own XHTML, and that would have to be managed, and that wasn't possible.
And most of these sites utilize a lot of CSS2 and some CSS3 that degrades nicely in IE6, because we know IE7 is coming, and I've tested it a few times, and it's pretty reliable. So we're just waiting for that to come out and really let loose on the whole CSS genre thing.
So am I right in what you said earlier when you started this presentation, that you guys kind of ramped up on this? Like, it was sort of this, we want to do this for about a year, and then we're going to do this for about, what, 2-3 months before you had to jump into this?
Well, yeah, so when I first started at Pop Art, I came from a Flash background. And I'm like, I saw CSS, let's do CSS. And everyone's like, you can't just do CSS. You know, like we had this whole production process in place and all that. So it was in the back of my mind, but you know, everyone was interested in doing it, but no one really knew how to just all of a sudden transition over. And it seriously was going to that web vision that was just like, all right, we just got to figure this out. You know, just creating up some prototypes. I spent a lot of hours on the Macs going home and going in the morning, just like trying to get it to work, taking our existing designs and making a CSS version of it, you know. And once we knew it was possible, the idea that all of us would have to bury ourselves in books and learn how to do something as advanced as this just didn't seem like it was going to work. So the next thing I did was try to scout out somebody that just was an expert in this area.